Silvereco the podcast presents Talks from the Experts, a podcast recorded during the Silvereco and Aging Wall International Festival at the Palais des Festivals in Cannes. This episode is dedicated to the concept of silver citizenship and the role of older citizens in European and international policy, with the participation of Moira, ALLAN, co-founder and international coordinator of the Pessidim Network, Adriane BERG, CEO of Generation Bold and the Ageless Traveler, and Marcel SMEETS, European consultant for EAN. This podcast is hosted by Ines O'DONOVAN, CEO of Jeunessima.
Welcome to the session of Silver Citizenship. And what we want to focus on here is on how we can achieve living a healthy, long life. Because if we look actually at the facts, we are all living longer than previous generations. And if we adhere to the rules and structures that we have now, health, social structures, economy, etc., then things are not going to go very well. So we are here to look at what we can do to shape a future that really helps us to have a prosperous life for everybody at any age. So let me just give you one statistics before I introduce the panel to you. We have to expect that the number of people, or the percentage of people over the age of 60 will be doubling by 2050. So from now currently globally 12% to 22%. If you look at individual countries, like Monaco, which is just around the corner, they have actually the oldest population, with 36% of them being over 60. Italy is not far behind, something around 30%. So it's really, really important that we start acting now. So let's introduce the panel. I want each of you to introduce yourself. Moira, let's start with you.
Moira ALLAN. I'm co-founder of a network called Pass It On Network. We are active in 60 countries around the world. And our purpose is to be present as older people, to take an active part in society, and also to advocate for the rights of older people.
Actually, I'm Marcel SMEETS. I'm a lobbyist. I'm an optimist. And I'm a future patient and older person as well. So actually, I'm very interested in and happy to be, as a lobbyist, able to manipulate or to steer policy making in the European Union. Because, as you said rightly, we have to act already now, because in 20 years I am in need, and I want to have some elderly care that is suited to my needs, that respects my rights, and enables me to live the life I want. And I think we have still a long way to go to realize that.
So I'm Adriane BERG, and I wear two hats. I'm a podcaster for a podcast called The Ageless Traveler. And also, I am one of the CEOs of Ageless Tourism. Now, the idea here is that we can create a new social structure as we get older. People 60 plus will be taking 1.6 trillion leisure trips in the next 25 years. And all of that is a catalyst for meeting new people and creating new social structures and fighting isolation, as well as fighting the barriers toward self-fulfillment. We also believe in voluntourism as really creating an economic tsunami for many countries that are underdeveloped. My second hat is with the United Nations. I'm the representative to the UN from the International Federation on Aging, which is the largest aging group of conglomerate NGOs, non-governmental organizations in the world. And next week is the Summit of the Future at the United Nations. I'll be there, and guess what? There's no discussion of aging. Why? Because many people feel that we have no future, even though a statistic just came out saying that people over the age of 60 have 50% of the wealth in the United States. 20% of the advertising targets us, and that's a growth from just a few years ago when it was only 10%. So how can we be the majority and yet be the minority when it comes to being forgotten? So I'm here to raise awareness about this, and that will impact public policy.
For sure. I'm Dr. Ines O'DONOVAN. I'm known as the Ageless Futurist, and I help individuals and organizations as a public speaker, workshop leader, advisor to see and what the future might be and what we can do right now to get there. Also, as a CEO of Jeunessima magazine, we are helping women to stay healthy, slow, maybe reverse aging, and live a little bit longer if we want to. We will anyway. I will be leading this session here, and if time remains, which I have my doubts, but if time remains, then there will be space for questions. If not, just come to us afterwards. I want to start looking at the way we see aging in the economy first. So for most of our lives, our path is pretty linear. We're obviously being born. We're going to a kindergarten crash. We're going to school. Then we study or learn a profession. We work for something like 40, 45 years. Then we stop. And then life is supposed to be over. So this is not the way I believe that we should be seeing it. And it's really not sustainable anymore because we're all living longer. So in fact, there's actually research from Dr. Andrew J. Scott who says that if we can prolong the healthy life expectancy, so health span, by just 1 year per person, then the value of that to the economy is $242,000. And if we extrapolate that to, like, unfortunately, it's only numbers for the US, but if you extrapolate that to the value it contributes to the economy is $38 trillion. It's absolutely mind-shattering. So what can we do now? And I do want to include you a little bit to see what you think. I want to make you think a little bit. So how many of you expect to continue contributing to the economy through work, mentorship, entrepreneurship, or so, after the age of 65? Interesting, about half.
Especially those who didn't raise their hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Those who didn't were the youngest in the group, by the way, because they don't know that they're going to do it.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's a good point. So maybe kind of you start more, not more, Adriane, kind of from your traveling perspective, I guess the people are pretty open and interested in keeping doing things. What are your experiences?
Right, so you know that aging is not a number, it's a stage. So it really depends on who you are at this moment, and aging is different for everyone. So the question that you brought up was, do you stop? And why would that even be a possibility of stopping? So you see those pictures there? You see my picture? That's 25 years ago. I was 50 years old then. Now this is important. Yesterday was my birthday. I was 76 years old. Now you can see that I don't look like that picture on the outside, but I haven't changed one bit on the inside. So, and that is the way we are, and that is the way you will be. Even if you have some sort of a disability, even if you have diabetes, or even if you have early onset Alzheimer's, we don't really change inside. And so if we have the opportunity, we take it. And I just, in terms of public policy, you're right. We will be able to contribute to the economy. But right now, if you look outside at every single one of the vendors, you will think that we are taking from the society. That all we are disabled, all we are people who need to be supported, we give nothing back. And that's exactly the opposite. That's the small minority. The major of us really do continue to work, be grandparents, travel, spend, change our housing, love our fashion. We bring, as you said, a huge amount of money into the economy.
Pick in on what you said, that aging is not a number, but a stage. I think that's very important. Even more provocative, you could say, aging is not a problem. And I'll come back to that later, because I'm here as a representative of the European Aging Network, which is the European Association of Elderly Care Providers. And we issued a vision 5 years ago on the long-term care in 2030, so that's tomorrow, in a way. And of course, we identified the common and the known problems and dilemmas, in a way. But I think what is revolutionary, or what I found very attractive of the group that drew the report, is that they said, aging is not a disease, it's just a stage of life, as Adriane said. And that has a lot of implications, in a way, because we are treating older people like patients. We house them in residences which are conceptualized as a hospital. And in many countries in the European Union, they are welcomed by people in a white dress, like a doctor. And all they're there to, in some way, to be cured from their expected disease, aging. But in fact, elderly care should be less medical and more social, in a way that it is elderly care is more supportive to what people in an older life stage still can do, because that's actually the issue. What can you do? And that's what you were referring in your question. Who wants to stay active in later life stages? But what do you need for that? And I think elderly care should turn, and also elderly care policies should more focus on what is possible, or what are the abilities of older people, and try to support that. So reablement, or just social support. That is more important, I think, for older people than just treating their incapabilities and so forth, which has also a huge impact on the economy. Yep. Because if you medicalize elderly care, it is costly as healthcare, which is not really needed, I think.
There's a lot we can do. Moira, you obviously have, with your organization, you have your ear to the ground. So what do people expect after the age of 60, 65 for themselves?
Well, just carry on living, and living to the full. I've been involved in this this aging issue since I was 60, and I'm 78 today. And I can assure you, these last decades have been the best of my life. They've been so rich. I've traveled all over the world. I've met active aging people all over the world. And I think what we all want is just to be treated normally. You know, I love to quote a fellow called Dr. Bill Thomas. He's a geriatrician in the United States. And Bill says the following. He says, every human being, from the time they enter the world and they get that first clap on their back and they go, they have two imperatives, and those imperatives are growth and development. And those are our imperatives right until we have our last breath. Now, obviously, our growth and our development imperatives are different at different stages of our lives. But we are here to grow and to develop. And in this last season, as some people call it, of our lives, we have this wonderful opportunity of sitting back, taking a look at our experience and what we've gained during this world, and see how we can contribute, whether it's to a grandchild, whether it's to an organization, whether it's to mentoring, whether it's to monitoring if the politicians do what they've been promising. But we definitely have a role. And I'd just like to quote two people, and then I'll keep quiet. The one is a wonderful woman who founded the Grey Panthers in America, called Maggie Kuhn. But Maggie Kuhn, when she was forced to retire at 65, her organization gave her a sewing machine. She was outraged. What's she going to do with a sewing machine? And she said that every single human being, every adult, has a role to play, and has a role to play right up until the end. So look up Maggie Kuhn, and she has 5 M's. I'm not going to go into them, we haven't got time. And the other thing I'd just like to cite is a book in the States which made a huge impression of me, which said, "Live long, die short." And I can never understand why politicians, maybe Marcel can explain, can't see the benefits of keeping us healthy active and engaged, because that saves money all round and gives us the joy de vivre, which we enjoy.
I'd like to mention policy specifically on this, because of something you both just said. You said aging is not a disease. Now I'm speaking about the US policy. That phrase comes from people who know that there are certain drugs that you can take, and they are non-addictive, that we are not allowed to get unless you're sick first. We are a culture of curing, not a culture of preventing. And so they wanted to make aging a disease so that people could actually get these drugs. And I was part of, I was a director of the Catalyst Institute for the Delay and Prevention of Age-Related Diseases. And we didn't want that because it was too stigmatizing. But isn't it a pity that that was something that we had to do? We still do not have the right to have a doctor prescribe clearly preventative medicine to get that extra 1, 2, or 3 years. That policy is not only in the US. We do have countries that are more prevention-oriented than we are, but many are not. Why wait to get sick? Why not have everything we need to live longer? The second policy in the US is the policy that it is legal to have over 55 communities. Here's where I get in trouble in the US. It's a disgrace. If I told you that there were communities that only people of a certain color could live, you would cancel my speaking engagement. And yet, we have that. And when I ask advocates for ageism, why, the answer is, it's the only way to socialize. People lose their social structure, and if you put everybody together who's over a certain age, they can meet each other and know each other. What a pity. That shouldn't even be possible in the US, those kinds of restrictions. And what's going on? It's getting popular in Europe and all over the world. Instead of going backwards, more and more people are going to age-based communities, and they are no longer having relationships with younger people. We use the word intergenerationalism. It's a phony. It's not working. We have to do a better job with our policy.
Yeah, and we're actually, there are areas obviously where they're trying to bring together the generations. But let me connect actually two topics here. So on one side, kind of we were talking about the economy. So right now what we see is what's called the silver economy. So, you know, basically we are expected once we're retired to be just, you know, stay alive and then die. So not to contribute. While I want to encourage all of us to move to a longevity economy, because that means we are actually staying active at any age, and that we also start preparing earlier for that. And that's kind of where I want to make the link and go over actually to the topic of health. Because, I mean, I'm actually one of the proponents to say, yes, you know, define aging as a disease for the simple reason that it allows us to actually do something and to do research about longevity and to actually see what can we do to prevent. So right now, our, what I call sick care system, because it's not, we don't have healthcare system. Our system only looks at us once we are in trouble, once we have problems. And that normally means decades of development. So there's no prevention. And when walking through outside, I saw one company that was focused on true prevention. Everybody else is, how can we make the life in the silver economy better, which is important, but we need to start earlier. So the future of healthcare must be prevention focused, where we also use things like AI, wearables, personalized care to prevent illness before it actually happens. If you look at the statistics, 9 out of the 10 basically diseases that cause death, 9 out of them can be prevented or postponed. At least postponed, but maybe even prevented. So there's a lot we can do if we start a lot earlier.
For the sake of discussion, I don't think that the healthcare system is not apt to the concept of prevention. It's the financing system, in a way. I'm not sure if you look at doctors or medical specialists or nurses, I think they are very, very well able to take a preventive stance. The problem is it's not reimbursed by the insurance, so they don't apply it. But a normal doctor will say, here's the drug you need for your disease, but actually take a hot shower and get less stress on
But
on the
do
work.
they actually do that? Most doctors don't.
I think so, but I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist and I have a positive look at it. But the issue of prevention, I think, is more the fact that it does not fit in any silo of the public or private healthcare or elderly care, long-term care system, because it's funding driven mostly. That's why politicians are reluctant in changing, I think. It's pharmaceuticals driven, which does not fit into a preventive concept at all. And again, I'm also a board member of the European Nutrition for Health Alliance. And actually what we want to do is to move from malnutrition to well nutrition. And especially for older people, we are convinced, and we have evidence, there's a business case, that if older people, or everyone actually, it's also for the youngsters, but older people especially, if you focus on well nutrition, that not only includes the food, but also the circumstances of serving food and the eating circumstances, not alone but socialized in a community or whatsoever, has such a big preventive aspect on everything of older people. And it does not cost anything more even, it brings money. Because waste of money, waste of food in elder care facilities is huge. It's more than 60%. But just ask people, what do you want to eat? And I'm quite sure that most people say, well, I have a recipe from when I was younger, and I can prepare it myself, but they're not allowed to prepare it themselves, because it's not hygienic, it's not blah, 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 blah. But if we have done the trials, and there are also here in France, there's a program running on the La Maison Gourmande, I think, a couple of years ago, was just trying to introduce the concept of good eating in elderly care, which is prevention per definition. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems also in convincing politicians, is that they're thinking in silos and they don't want to take the vertical stance on prevention or good living.
Yeah. Moira, kind of from your perspective, like obviously you have kind of like have seen communities, you have a community. What's their perspective?
I think what we all feel is, you know, we dislike this question of just being like stuck into a category of older person. We're the same, as Adriane said earlier on, you know, the same person inside. I didn't turn 65 and become an older person. It's very much a question of a life course approach, and I think that's what's really missing, because if we want to change anything now, we have to start with the kids and teach them, because apparently the ageist mentality that you develop is at age 4. When you see granny, so you put this idea in your head that granny is, you know, with a stick and bent over and can't do things. So I think a plea from our organization is, you know, just let us get on with our lives, and we refuse to be transparent, because that's what happens. You know, you turn 65 and then suddenly you become transparent somehow along the line. And we have the greatest power. If you think of how many votes we have, just think about that. We have a tremendous voting power, but we do not exercise it. We don't monitor, we don't execute. And I think it's also because we've all been very well brought up. You know, we've been brought up to be polite. And for us now at 65 plus, we should no longer be polite. And I'm not saying you're going to jump in 4 feet in the trough, but we need to get rid of this sort of, you know, yes, please, may I? Nonsense. We represent a very strong contingent of voters, and that talks as far as parliamentarians are concerned. So my thing is to motivate as many people as possible, whatever their age, to be involved and to remain involved. Don't put yourself in a category.
There was a time, and it has changed, that politicians did target the older vote. They said, you know, older adults do vote. They vote, particularly Social Security used to be called the third rail. You could never, ever touch it because older adults will vote against you. But today, there's a lot of issues as to whether or not older adults are coming out and voting. That has changed enormously from the time that I first myself was able to vote. And I think that there's a lot of feeling that we're just fed up with both the economy, the politicians, and what's happening. For this, I say, we cannot give up. We have to stay in the game of policy change and policy making and not feel that we don't have power, because we are actually the majority. If you look at population pyramids, we're the majority in most places, in every state of the United States except Utah. Really. So that's for us, and it's true in other countries. I look at those population pyramids. There are more of us than anybody else, so be careful. But I will also say that Maggie Kuhn and others like her said, every baby is the same, but every senior is different. And that's what they don't see. It's very hard to see what you're going to be like when you're older. It is interesting that it's very hard to relate to your older self until you get there. And then you see what you could have done to prepare for this. So I think we need some education on growing older too, even in our fundamental government schools, to understand aging. We have home economics, we have healthcare, we have gym. Why not understand aging as a topic? That would be an educational public policy change in almost every country.
Yeah, there's actually, in my opinion, there's a lot more there. I mean, we are missing a lot of the fundamentals in education, not only related to aging. I mean, how do you eat healthy, from the beginning? Because a lot of kids don't know that anymore because their parents don't know anymore. There are so many things where politics, etc., can actually make a difference. But yeah, let's see. But actually, because you came up with the topic of learning and education, I want to continue with that because I think that really the way we have been learning has to change, because we have to learn our whole life through. The system that we've used so far, okay, yes, as I said earlier on, it's like you go to kindergarten, school, study, or learn a profession, and then you kind of have to try to do a little bit here and there. That's completely outdated. Even if you go to university now for 4 years or so, by the end you come out, all the stuff or most of the stuff you've learned is out of date. So how can we change that? And I'll come back to you with that, so maybe you can start thinking about it already. But what about, for instance, like mini retirements? In my opinion, there's no point waiting until you're 60, 65, 67, and it's getting pushed more and more, and then hoping that you can do all the things that you have been planning to do your whole life long, just to find out that you might not be able to do that anymore. So the idea of mini retirements for me personally is super attractive, taking half a year out in between, where you can learn something new, where you can relax, where you can do things that you really enjoy, and maybe you can also learn things at that time that are either new for your profession, maybe you change profession, or where you actually add more information to what you've been doing so far. I also personally like the idea of subscriptions to universities, for instance. Instead of, okay, here you have 4 years and it's over, maybe you're still an alumni, but that's it. What about continuing and constantly learning something new in small doses, personalized? So just, again, a question for all of you. Who of you feels like you need to actually learn new skills, whether if it's for work or for your personal growth as you age?
Germany has a public policy that I discovered in a conference at the UN, that if you have a certain number of employees in your corporation, you must prepare them for their retirement. And they have a year of training. And most of that training has to do with what's your next goal in life. For most people, it's volunteering. In our Ageless Traveler podcast, we have something called the Ageless Ambassador for volunteering, going on trips where you can volunteer and then come back and continue that skill. So we are missing a huge opportunity for volunteers all over the world. We can turn people over the age of 65 or retirees whenever they retire into really a workforce for volunteering. But again, that's a matter of training, policy, could be corporate. What could the governments do? Well, they could subsidize some of the corporate training. They could offer entrepreneurs, through many of their entrepreneurial organizations, retirement planning. And not just the financial side, but the lifestyle side. And that would be certainly something I never had. I had a lot of mini retirements because I got fired a lot. So couldn't hold a job. So I had all these opportunities and then realized I was really an entrepreneur. But the fact is that we all need that. We definitely do need what now is called retirement coaching. But only a select people do that. A lot of your folks are in that field. We should all have access to that.
Absolutely. No, we've got several organizations with their own networks, and their whole task is to help people transit. Because as I think Adriane was saying, it's a stage. You're going into a different stage. And when you leave your work, you could have today, according to Stanford University, more and more, you could live to 100 years. So you've got, let's say, 30 to 40 years of a new stage of your life. And there's nowhere on earth that you would have entered your 20s not knowing what you're going to do, not training yourself to do something. So it's of vital importance to get your mind around that and get yourself, think of it, four decades of life that you're going to live. And if you just go into that and say, well, you know, I'm going to play golf, I've always loved to swim, and you know, you can play golf so much, you can swim that much, but you need to have some meaning in your life. And the meaning is something that you can create yourself by developing your interests, asking yourself what you're really interested in and then delving into it. And everything in this world is a world of its own. You know, I'd just like to talk about 2 or 3 of our ventures around the world. We've got in Perth, we've got a woman who started, it's now become Australia-wide. It's called Switched On Seniors. And she's got this organization now, and she trains seniors to train other seniors to computer literacy. And so she's trained people, and she's created jobs, although they're all voluntary jobs for other people. And then, as we mentioned, we've got several networks of people training people. And then as far as the lifelong learning is concerned, I think one of the exciting things that we've done is to set up a University of the Third Age activity in Southern Africa. And in Southern Africa, we have enormous problems with electricity, so we have outages. But everybody has a telephone. So these University of the Third Age courses are run through WhatsApp. And that works in Africa. So at the beginning of the month, for example, a doctor will talk about dental health, for example. And then for the rest of the month, people react to that and get information on that particular subject. So what I'm saying, I think, in short, is that we're pioneers. My organization's called the Pass It On Network, which has a horrible acronym, PION, as you can see. So we just add the EER, pioneers, because we are pioneers. We don't have seniors above us to teach us what to do. We are in that field. And we must stop asking permission, and we must start just doing it. Just do it. You know, not to quote somebody else, but it's just do it.
Yeah. Actually, I want to, because we need to soon come to an end, I do want to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, actually, there are plenty, and feeded by what is already said, but from the European Aging Network's perspective, skills, and of course we're talking about skills and lifelong learning for older people, but I think more of even important is skilling of staff supporting older people. As we recognize that aging is not a disease but just a stage in life, with non-medical needs in general, that also needs differently skilled staff and nurses and people that try to help all the people that need support. And that's very funny in a way that we are training now nurses based on the old principles and the old system. So the system will stay on, will go on as it is. And I think that's a first shift. Secondly, I think that it's also a matter of mentality. If I see my parents who are in their 90s, actually they had a completely different view on what is the ideal life. The ideal life was making a biggest career possible into 40 years with the same organization, and then you can relax. No way they were thinking after my retirement I will go traveling around the world. That was not their interest. Their main interest was making that big career. That has completely changed now. And I'm quite sure that the people, the youngsters now, they will bring that same concept to the future. So curing the old problem or the old mentality with nowadays recipes could be not the wisest strategy. Actually, we should prepare the system for the desires and the demands of the people now who will retire in 20 years. So in a way, we still have 5 years to organize that, because it will take 15 years before we have another system. And I'm not sure if we can do a big bang and change it all immediately. But that's actually what my personal concern, and what I don't understand with my friends, for example. They're not aware or they're not busy with their retirement. As you said rightly, because I have another problem than you have. I've been fired as well several times, but the problem is I'm Dutch. I'm living in Belgium. I've worked for a French company. I've a Czech retirement. And I can tell you that's a big mess. And I'm happy that it is a mess, because 20 years ago it was nothing. So we are already on a good way to organize these retirement systems and pension systems. And I think that's also a third element of lifelong learning and self-deployment, development, very important. But I think that the current system is based on old principles, and we should change the principles, and therefore start as fast as possible changing the system to be capable to receive those people.
This is so important. You know, you mentioned Stanford University. So they are doing something called mapping the 100-year life. And you should take a look at that. That might be one of the most important things to get out of this. They're thinking about it. It's a think tank, and they're coming up with the new pace of life, as you mentioned. Why should we not have a year, now they call it the golden gap year, for people around the age of 40, so they can see what life might be like if they're not in the midst of their career, and so on and so forth. It's called mapping the 100-year life. The problem is that when I talk to people my age, and you're much younger than I am, in their 70s and 80s, they think I'm nuts. I get a lot of pushback. No, we just want to play golf. We deserve, the word deserve.
Oh.
We deserve to do nothing. Well, I say, how about volunteering? They say, well, I don't know, I have no time. What are you doing? I'm playing pickleball. So I call it Pickleball Nation now. I get in a lot of trouble. But the thing is that I don't believe that it's going to be the same with all the young faces I see out here right now. And folks who are a little bit older, you're here, so it's not going to be the same with you either. And therefore, I think it really is worthwhile to prepare for the new old person and really let people who want to play golf. That's all right. It's not my business. But those who don't really need a path. They really need guidance. They need a path, and they need to start while they're in the midst of their careers. And that will be a coalition between government policy, tax policy, and corporate policy, I think. Okay. And it could be done. I just want to point out that Max Planck Institute says that 63% of those 4-year-olds that make the decision about what being old means comes from their grandparents.
Right.
Not Facebook, WhatsApp, cartoons, Disney. I'm shocked, but it doesn't come from social media. It actually comes from seeing who's in their family. And that gives us the responsibility to show them how wonderful life can be after a certain age.
I want all of you, because we really have to end, I want all of you to think about just one small thing that you would recommend to the audience that they can do right now in order to prepare the future. Let me say one provocative thing from my side before that. So Ray Kurzweil, who is a quite well-known futurist and has been right quite a lot of times, he talks about longevity escape velocity, which is supposed to happen in around 2029. He has been predicting that for a long time. What does it mean? Longevity escape velocity means that for every year that you're alive, another year is added on to your life. So in theory, if nothing else happens, that could mean that you become immortal. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but we are going to live significantly longer. Like especially since COVID, a lot of research, or a lot more research, still not enough, but a lot more research has been put into looking at aging, prevention, and what we can do and how we can prolong life. So we will be living longer. So we need to start thinking about all of that right now. And that's where your tips come in. Marcel, you start.
So my final thought is very simple. I want you all to switch your minds and think of yourselves as centenarian apprentices. And build up your curriculum of what you need to be a good centenarian apprentice.
Well, you'll think this is funny, but it's very serious. When my mom was 90, I asked her that question. What could you tell me? One thing that you could tell me. And she thought about it for a really long time. And she said, don't forget to moisturize. And I've been unpacking that for 15 years. The tools are there. Just use them. That's it.
Well, and I think that aging in place is per definition local. So I think you have to start thinking in terms of what will be your final place, or the place where you want to be happy. And that's where you have to be, you have to get engaged with the society and the funding and the continuity and the sustainability of it. I think that's 4 easy things, but very difficult to manage and to do it. But already start thinking about it would be very, very helpful, I think.
And my advice would be to start measuring and tracking your biological age, especially, because your chronological age has nothing to do with your biological age. And if your body, your cells are healthier, younger, then you will live healthier longer and potentially longer in total. So that would be my suggestion. And with that, I want to end this panel. And as you can see, and we didn't even talk about all the topics. We just touched slightly on a few of them. There's so much we could talk about. Technology, for instance, we didn't really touch on at all. There are so many things we didn't talk about, and that we should be talking about, and that we need to start thinking about right now. So it's really about staying active and engaged and empowered throughout all our life. And then we can also really see and create a future that's where aging is not a burden, but actually an opportunity. So with that, thank you all. Thank you to the panel. And have a good rest of the day.